Hi, welcome back to Keep It Dirty, a podcast where my guests share their life living functionally and sustainably and their why behind their experiences navigating through our ever-changing environment. I am your host, Leslie Dowling. I am a functional nutrition and lifestyle practitioner and corporate speaker. And today it is my pleasure to introduce to you the founder and president of Dr. Lewis Nutrition, Dr. John Lewis, who has a passion for educating others about the importance of nutrition, dietary supplementation, and exercise for health. And in particular, he studies and applies clinical nutrition for the benefit of mankind. He has conducted over 30 different studies in his research career evaluating the effects of nutrition, dietary supplementation, and exercise on human health. And he has over 180 peer-reviewed publications in some of the world's leading scientific journals. So, Dr. Lewis, it's such a pleasure to have you today. Thanks for taking time out to be on my show.
Thank you so much for having me and that kind introduction. I look forward to our conversation today, Leslie.
So with all of the wealth of information and all that you've done over the years and to help and empower others, I guess I'll back it up a little bit. But what was the catalyst for you to even get involved in this? Did you always know that you wanted to be a doctor, or maybe you could share your story with everybody?
I would say my story goes all the way back to when I was just a little guy, not even in elementary school yet, when my grandfather, this poor man, had the worst rheumatoid arthritis you can imagine, but he still loved me so much that he would get out in the backyard and pitch baseball to me. And so that put me on a path to playing sports. I just enjoyed being physically active as a youth. I'd play anything with a ball other than soccer. And and then later in undergrad, in college, I got into drug-free bodybuilding. And that was really an effort to, I guess, probably overcompensate for being a very skinny kid. But as I got into weight training, my body responded really well to it. And then I took it to the next level to get into competitive bodybuilding, which ultimately didn't last too long. But I realized pretty quickly that I was never going to make a living doing that. I wasn't going to pay my bills as a bodybuilder. And also, as I mentioned, being drug free, I just was not willing to take the risks of taking steroids for what ultimately is a very narcissistic thing to do, in my opinion. And I still train as a bodybuilder. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I still love that form of exercise, but it's a very demanding thing. And I even if somebody's taking drugs, I appreciate the capacity that somebody has for pursuing that, because it is definitely something that, number one, is you don't have instant gratification. I mean, it takes years in most cases to get to any real level of competition. But number two, I mean, you have to be incredibly disciplined. You know, it's not something that you just snap your fingers and do. So, and then for people who are doing competitions and working a full-time job in another field, I mean, that's also just an incredible effort in time management. So I applaud people who can do that. For me, it ultimately became like another job, and I really didn't care for that. It really kind of took away the joy for me. But what that period of my life really did for me was it made me evaluate physical activity and nutrition and supplementation in almost a very professional way, even before I had started my research career. So it made me really look at how we can utilize these things for, at that point, more of a performance perspective rather than health. But it was a significant milestone for me in my life. And I didn't ultimately decide to become a researcher then. I just kind of fell into it as I was going through my degrees and my training. I ultimately liked the academic lifestyle at that point in my life. And so I spent a couple of decades in nutrition and physical activity research, as you mentioned, but it wasn't something I really planned. I mean, I know people that, they think from a very young age, I want to be a physician or a dentist or a lawyer or whatever. For me, I've been kind of like a chameleon, depending on where I am in my life and what stage I am. I adapt to people around me, and then my interests sort of change. But I did know that ultimately something related to health and wellness would be my calling or my niche. And so I was very fortunate to get into this whole line of polysaccharide research that we can talk about if you like as well. But
Sure.
no, I would say none of this was really planned, other than the fact that I've always enjoyed being physically active and exercising. And then the nutritional piece came much later. But I really went from the person growing up as a typical Southerner, as a typical American of eating for taste. I had no one in my family or in my circle who I would call or refer to as like a health mentor. I mean, this was really my own sort of creation out of just my own interests and what I decided was the most important things for me in life. And so I was very lucky to have gone down this road of research, and now here I am today in business. I gave up the academic life actually about 7 years ago this month, but it's been an interesting journey. And my mission, as you said, is really just to help people better understand how they can protect themselves and achieve some level of health and wellness, mostly through nutrition and exercise, and then these key supplements and polysaccharides.
Yeah, maybe you could share with everybody, our viewers and listeners, the importance of polysaccharides for, brain health, immune function, and maybe explain what are polysaccharides, because a lot of people might not know what that is. And also, there's such a bad rap about polysaccharides, depending the raw and refined sugars, whatnot. So maybe you could break that down and share with everybody a little tutorial about that.
Well, this is one of the most important points of anything that I can share with your listeners. And that is, in my opinion, this is a very opinionated statement, but I believe that sugar is one of the most widely misused and abused words, certainly in nutritional science and maybe in all of health and wellness. You hear so many so called experts or influencers out there talking all sugar is bad. I've heard that. I don't know about you. I've heard that statement a million times. All sugar is bad. That is a garbage statement. That is throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It's factually incorrect, and here's why. Mother Nature provides, there must be thousands of sugars in Mother Nature. And there are four basic categories biochemically in terms of their structure. You have monosaccharides, mono one saccharide sugar, one molecule of sugar like high fructose corn syrup. If you're eating lots of high fructose corn syrup every day, certainly I would agree with you that's probably not your best strategy for achieving health. In fact, it's related to different types of metabolic complications, especially if you're consuming them daily. Then disaccharides, DI, saccharide, two sugar molecules like sucrose. It's a bit more complex in structure. And, it's, again, if you're eating a lot of sucrose every day, that's probably not your best strategy for achieving health. Next, you have oligosaccharides. These types of sugars are found in breast milk. They're found in different types of vegetables. These are very, very beneficial. They provide different types of prebiotic, postbiotic, and probiotic effects that are very beneficial for us. And then finally, you have polysaccharides. These are literally hundreds or thousands of these glucose units attached together, the most sophisticated, complex biochemical structures that we will eat. Way more sophisticated than amino acids, fatty acids, certainly vitamins and minerals. These things are so dense in their complexity that they cannot even be drawn on a piece of paper. They're literally like 5D objects. So I say all of that to say I'm defining the different types of saccharides to say that saccharide, sugar, carbohydrate, those are all generically synonyms. But again, a sugar is not a sugar. It depends on its biochemical structure and its source. And then the polysaccharides that my colleagues and I have been studying for all these years from aloe vera and rice bran, I would put these things up against anything else Mother Nature provides for us for a healing benefit. Not only are they not bad for us, again, I would argue they're the most beneficial things that we can consume on a daily basis. And with all due respect to the people out there caught up in the carnivore, paleo, keto movement, pushing all of this protein, all of this animal meat, this, don't be so blinded that you think I can't consume anything from a plant. That is a ridiculous way of looking at this, because you only need a few hundred milligrams to maybe a couple of grams per day of these polysaccharides, again, from aloe vera and rice bran, which, oh, by the way, no one eats aloe vera. I don't know about you. I don't know anyone who eats aloe vera. And you would only get the rice bran if you eat brown rice. Most of the world prefers to actually eat white rice. I think something like 70 to 80% of the world, or 70 to 80%.
So let's go back to where you were talking about the polysaccharides. I know we've been having issues with the sound today, and I'd love for you to maybe share with our listeners. There's a lot of controversy on supplementation. And how do we know? We're also bio-individual as to what type of supplements we need, or is that through blood work, or how do we really tap into what every walking journal, we're like a walking journal. What does A, B, C, we're all very different. So maybe you could
Absolutely.
share a little bit with that too.
Absolutely. Well, I think and I don't know how it will turn out in the recording. If we need to do this again, that's fine. But I was almost to the end of my point about the saccharides, that the polysaccharides from aloe vera and rice bran are arguably, in my opinion, the most beneficial for us that Mother Nature provides to us for a health promoting benefit. So the only thing that I would put relatively close to their effects would be curcumin. I think curcumin obviously has been widely studied, and it has a lot of very incredible benefits, but you have to have a particular formulation with it because it's not very bioavailable or absorbable by the body unless it's formulated properly. My final point to that is just I would encourage everybody to try to be more mindful of the fact that when somebody makes the statement, all sugar is bad, it's a very ignorant, factually incorrect statement, and it really excuse me, depends on the context of where that sugar comes from and its biochemical structure. So just please keep that in mind because, again, there's so many people out there knocking sugar, and it's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous statement. But to your question about how do we know what to take or what to do, I think the best example for that is vitamin D. So unfortunately, about 70% of Americans today are either insufficient or deficient in their vitamin D level. It's a very simple test to take. I think Life Extension, for example, even has a little finger prick test. You can just prick your finger, get a little drop of blood, send it into their lab for like $25 or $30. So it's not even that expensive. But try to check that every day. Now, there's definite debate about what's considered optimal. I've got a friend who thinks your optimal level is above 100. Most people say at least 60 to 80, somewhere in that range. I usually am somewhere around 60 to 70. But definitely, if you're below 20, you're deficient. If you're 20 to 30, you're insufficient. And Leslie, it's not even a vitamin, it's actually a prohormone. This particular nutrient is so beneficial for us. We now know it interacts with over 4,500 of our genes. It's way more important than just for your bone health. It literally affects everything head to toe, every major organ system. It's so, so important for us. And then, of course, you need to take your vitamin K along with your vitamin D because they both act synergistically together to help calcium end up in your bones, not floating around in your bloodstream and causing you atherosclerosis or other cardiovascular problems. But that's a very simple test that people can take and monitor. I would suggest at least once per year just to see what your levels are. And then, of course, things like iron and B12. I mean, there are even omega-3 fatty acid tests or different omega tests that you can take. All these different things would give you some idea of what you may or may not need. You can look at methylation. That's another good example. If you have the MHTFR gene, if you have that mutation, then you definitely need the methylated forms of B12 and the other vitamin B complexes. So, those are the kinds of things. They don't cost a lot of money. They give you very solid data. And then those kinds of decisions can help you determine whether or not you need to take some of these vitamins and minerals. Now, going back to the polysaccharides for a second, there is no assay or any kind of a metabolic test to say I'm deficient in polysaccharides. And there never will be. There's just not going to be any sort of test like that. And this is not an opinion. This is based on my research, our research, my colleagues and I, what we've published, and other colleagues, other scientists around the world have looked at these particular polysaccharides and their effects on, as you mentioned in the introduction to the show, on the immune system, on cognitive function, on inflammation, adult stem cell production, balancing different components of the immune system, the effects on infection, the effects on functionality. I mean, there are so many different effects that we know that these polysaccharides help us to engage in or do. And so my point to anybody is, there's no test for it, but why in the world would you not want to enjoy the benefits of those things? And especially, why in the world would you not want to prevent something like neurodegeneration or cardiovascular disease or cancer, all the major killers? Why would you not want to help keep your body well and healthy and optimally supported? And one way to do that is with these polysaccharides. So my entire family, we've all been on these polysaccharides for many, many years. I mean, I'd be a hypocrite if I was talking about our research and our products and not taking it myself. But to me, I look at prevention as just as important, if not more important, than treatment. So I look at it from taking these polysaccharides every day as one of the most important tools in my toolbox to help keep me and my family and anybody else that I know healthy.
And we'd love to know also, I know a lot of people talk about the standard American diet. And so maybe you could share a little bit about that. And really, as I say, just navigating through, there's soil depletion. That's why there's direct links and correlations, like you were saying, vitamin D, but mental health too, depression, magnesium, deficient in magnesium. So there's so many things that we really, 50 years ago, we didn't have these issues 75 years ago. So maybe you could share some, information on that too, to everybody.
Sure. Well, excuse me, as you mentioned in my introduction, I've been eating a plant-based diet for 27 years. So, clearly this new wave of the carnivore crowd, which I don't know about you, my opinion of the carnivore movement is basically it's the same as the Robert Atkins movement from, I think Atkins published his first book in 1972. I forget the name of it, but I mean, this movement of, eating all this meat and all this animal food is nothing new. Again, Atkins, at least, I don't know, maybe there were people before him, but I know he started that in the early 1970s. And then it just kind of morphed along the way throughout the years. And then, of course, paleo keto, that came around a number of years ago, and now it's kind of morphed into carnivore. So those people do not agree with, people like me eating a plant-based diet. They think plants have all of these so-called anti-nutrients. The nutrients are inferior to meat, blah, blah, blah. Well, to your point about the standard American diet, I mean, look what has happened to us since at least the Industrial Revolution, when there started to become a shift away from agriculture where people became more specialized in different fields. And so 100 years ago, you and I wouldn't be sitting here right now. We'd be out in our garden working, probably. We would be out there working and making our own food on some level. But this whole notion of how we've shifted from an agrarian agricultural society to a technological one has really killed us. I mean, it just is shocking, as you know, how badly we now are just dealing with all of these different chronic diseases that are so driven by what you just said, the standard American diet, or the SAD. When you look at all of this animal food, all of these additives, I mean, thank God somebody like RFK became the head of HHS to try to get some of this going back in a different direction. I mean, I guess, one of the things that he focused on initially was the issue of these artificial dyes and food colorings, which, I don't know. To me, that may not necessarily, that may be kind of, in my opinion, low hanging fruit. I don't really know that that's such a big issue compared to some of these other things. When you look, excuse me, starting in like the early 60s, you had all of this introduction with the green revolution of all of these pesticides, herbicides, all these different chemicals and synthetic inputs, as you mentioned, that have had a very bad effect on our soil. And so with that effect, you have this decreasing level of food quality ultimately, because you have all of these monocrop production techniques that destroy the soil in addition to all these chemical inputs. But what happened right before that? We had the introduction of fast food. We had this McDonald's explosion occur, and then all these other companies followed McDonald's. And so now you have this very habitual societal, cultural way of eating or way of looking at food that we as Americans have today, where if you don't pull yourself out of that, then you are just sucked into it. And so you're eating all of this macronutrition. You get all of this protein, fat, carbohydrate, but you get very little of the micronutrition, like the vitamins and minerals and the other things that we really need to function. And I would even include, even though the polysaccharides from aloe vera and rice bran are technically macronutrients, they really function more like micronutrients in terms of the way they have these amazing effects on our system. We have been such a victim of our own devices in terms of allowing this corporate takeover of our food production that's really all about this massive approach to producing food that really has very little to no quality to it, but yet it's enough to keep us satiated for that one meal. And then, of course, people get hungry again because they didn't get the micronutrition they needed. So they get hungry again because the cells are saying, wait a minute, you fed me all of this macronutrition, but I didn't get the micronutrition that I need to actually function properly. And this is why we have now, what is it, like 70% of Americans are either overweight or obese. I mean, it's just incredible. When you look at the statistics, whether it's obesity, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, cancer, neurodegeneration, mood disorder and depression, bone disease, liver disease, kidney disease. I mean, just take your pick of any of those top 10 chronic diseases, and they're entirely driven by our lack of really proper nutrition. And again, the carnivore people won't agree with me what I believe is proper nutrition, but that's kind of another argument. But it's just incredible how we've shifted. I mean, I don't know about you. When I grew up in school in the 70s and 80s, there were maybe a handful of chubby kids that we, would pick on, of course, as children do. And now you look at children today, they're all chubby. Like, it's just incredible what has happened to our children's health. And that's where, again, hopefully some of these changes within HHS will start bearing some fruit down the road. It's not going to happen overnight, but I mean, we are just such a sick society today. It's like everyone is either overweight or obese, has diabetes, has hypertension, has all these other cardiovascular issues, all of these mental health issues. I mean, it's just overwhelming, really. And so that's part of, again, like you, my mission is to help people try to get back to a health, try to get off of their food addiction. I mean, I'm certainly no mental health expert, but I think we have a nation of food addicts, and it starts with, all of these additives in our food of, salt and the fatty content, the sweeteners, and all these different things that create all of this addictive stuff in the mental psychological framework of the average person, and it's just killing us.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And, unfortunately, the demise, or however, I know parents see it sometimes as a babysitter, but the virtual, the computers, the games, the gaming. I
Right.
mean, it's a shame. You go by these where the pool, in the summer, and we used to get ride our bikes to the pool. You don't see as many kids riding their bikes, going to the pool, getting outside, getting the fresh air, grounding with Mother Earth, environmentally too. There's so many things that we need to get back to, and prepping our food, and just the simple things of chewing and digesting, and really taking the time to sit and relax and calm yourself, and have, as my mother would say, table conversation. She'd say, turn off the idiot box and let's have
That's
table conversation. I
that's
mean,
right.
and you see kids out to dinner with the cell phones in front of them. Yeah, there's just so many things that we could be more mindful about. And it's just simple tweaks, and just, really empowering the younger generation to just have better, healthier habits, to go with mom and maybe go to the market over the weekend, the farmers markets, get to know who these farmers are, the people that are, bringing the foods and the produce to the different markets, and taking time to really enjoy cooking with the family. Those are the things that people did years ago, or sitting down. And I know that kids have a lot of sports and activities. We all have a crazier life, but take at least one night out of the week to sit with your family and have some sort of conversation, I think is really important. And I did also want to ask you, because I know we've been having glitches in and out of this conversation, but what was your best research discoveries at the University of Miami Miller School of Medicine? Some of the research that you've done, or that you could share with everybody.
Well, excuse me. Thank you for that question. By the way, to your point of technology, we went out for Mother's Day dinner Sunday, and we were sitting at our table, and we noticed a table next to us. It was a lady and apparently her daughter. Leslie, this girl had headphones on, and she was looking at her phone the entire time they were there together. The mom was sitting there, just kind of reading the menu by herself. My mother felt so bad. She actually walked over to the lady and started a conversation with her, because this girl was, I don't know, 15, 16, 17, who knows, but had the headphones on the whole time and scrolling on her phone. Unbelievable.
Wow.
So sad.
Yeah.
We as a family, I mean, like last night I had a lecture, messed up things, and my wife's brother it was his birthday. But we as a family, we sit down every evening to eat dinner. I make dinner for us every day.
That's wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah. And we go grocery shopping every week. I mean, all of those things are very important. If you're not doing those things, in my opinion, you are making a big mistake in terms of, what you're doing to yourself, and maybe even more importantly, what you're teaching your children. But
Yeah.
moving forward, I was so lucky to have met Dr. Reg McDaniel, this gentleman who introduced me to the power of his life and what he had discovered with his colleagues back going all the way to like the mid 1980s about aloe vera. And ultimately, when I met him about 20 years ago, he was already 20 years into his aloe vera journey. But Reg is a pathologist. He's still doing his thing every day in his late 80s today. But Reg discovered that these allopolysaccharides, much like what I've been mentioning already, were just incredibly beneficial. I mean, he went from running a pathology unit at a hospital in Dallas, Texas, to practicing nutrition. That's how this completely shifted his life. And so Reg was giving a lecture talking about some of his work anecdotally with people with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. And there happened to be a lady in the audience who was very inspired by his work and what he was doing. And so she and her husband ultimately created a relationship with Reg. And then they ultimately decided to make a gift for research. They felt so compelled because they had lost 4 family members to Alzheimer's disease, this terrible disease that's now the 6th leading killer of Americans. And so Reg and I were just getting to know each other. It's hard to believe that's been almost 20 years ago, but he did not have any affiliation with the university. And I was just learning, I was learning his story and getting excited about what he had discovered and what we could do. And so it was only through the generosity of this family that we were able to run these 2 clinical trials, both in Alzheimer's and multiple sclerosis. But what we discovered with our dietary supplement, this Aloe supplement that we call Daily Brain Care now, is that we studied people with moderate to severe Alzheimer's disease, which at that level of severity, big pharma cares nothing about. I mean, they don't even look at those people as having any chance. They really are focused on either mild cognitive impairment, which about 50% of people who get diagnosed with MCI will progress into dementia. So fortunately, 50% don't. Or if you have a mild form of dementia. But we wanted to study the really sick people because, again, they have basically no chance. So we gave them our formula for 12 months. We collected blood at baseline in 12 months to look at a whole panel and a whole host of different immune and inflammatory markers. And then we assessed cognitive function at baseline, 3, 6, 9, and 12 months. Going into it, we were very optimistic, but anytime you run a clinical trial, you really have no idea what you're going to find out until you get to the very end of the study and you start analyzing the data. Well, as we were running the study, and it took a couple of years, as you can imagine, having a 12-month intervention. I mean, and for people that don't know, that's a very long time to run a clinical trial. And believe me, that was some of the hardest work of my career. But I was getting staff members, caregivers, people that were so just committed to their loved one and their patient, calling me up and saying, "Hey, Dr. Lewis, I can't believe what my patient or my wife or my grandmother, whatever the relationship was, they're now talking about things, doing things that they in some cases hadn't done for years." So I felt very excited and very optimistic that at the end of the day, we would have something really impressive in our data. Leslie, sure enough, when we started looking at the cognitive function data, and we used something called the ADAS-Cog, which is considered to be the gold standard for assessing cognitive function, particularly among people with dementia. And by the way, for our listeners, just so you're clear, cognitive function is way more than just memory. A lot of times people think memory is cognitive function. Memory is only one component of cognitive function. You have short-term memory, long-term memory, processing speed, executive functioning, spatial awareness. You have a whole host of different things or different characteristics to go into this concept that we call cognition. So it's much, much more than just memory. But at 9 and 12 months, we showed clinically and statistically significant improvement in cognitive function. Let me repeat that because it's very important. If you don't take away anything else that I say from this interview or this conversation today, let me repeat this one more time. We showed clinically and statistically significant improvement in cognitive function in people with moderate to severe Alzheimer's disease. And by the way, they were 79.9 years of age on average. Leslie, that is unheard of in response to our dietary supplement. That is unheard of in the scientific literature. Excuse me. You can compare that to the 5 FDA approved drugs for dementia. They basically do nothing. If you're unfortunately diagnosed with dementia or Alzheimer's disease, you start taking one of these drugs, it might delay the progression of the disease. It might, slow down that progression for a while, but you will still decline and fall off the cliff. You can look at any other type of dietary supplement, any diet, any exercise, hyperbaric oxygen, red light therapy, music therapy, sound therapy, acupuncture, you name it. You pick the intervention or treatment, you will not find anything else like that. When we made this discovery, I was so excited. I can't tell you. I felt like I wanted to run around my neighborhood, throwing a parade or something. It was just an incredible finding because I knew there was nothing else like that. And we've published now 4 papers from that study. That first paper was published in 2013. Neither before nor since has there been anything else like that in the scientific literature. Don't take my word for it. Have your listeners go to PubMed themselves. Do your own literature search. I challenge anybody out there to find something else similar to that. Now, let me explain why I'm very specifically mentioned clinically and statistically significant, because that is a very important distinction. And we had 34 people in the study, which was a pretty good number considering the limited amount of money we had and the length of the study and the severity of the disease of these patients. If you have hundreds or thousands of people in a study and you assess people multiple times and you have this just gigantic pile of data at the end, the law of large numbers says just by randomness, just by random chance, you will find statistical significance, which we typically use this arbitrary value of p equal to 0.05, which just simply says is there's a 1 in 20 chance that whatever you found was due to randomness or error. So again, if you have large numbers, you can find statistical significance all day long, but does that have any clinical or practical relevance to the real world or somebody's quality of life? On the ADAS-Cog, if you have a change in the score of 4 points or greater, either way, better or worse, that is considered clinically significant. And that's what we showed at 9 and 12 months. These people got better clinically at 9 and 12 months, according to the ADAS-Cog. So we really, you want to talk about hitting something that, in my opinion, was just so incredible. Unfortunately, people at NIH and Alzheimer's Association didn't see it that way, and that's ultimately why I left academics. I tried, after that first paper was published, I tried 4 times, 2 times with NIH, 2 times with the Alzheimer's Association to say, here, look at what we're doing. This is the 6th leading killer of Americans. It's costing us somewhere between $500 billion and $1 trillion per year in direct and indirect care costs. It's literally killing the person. It's killing the primary caregiver. The primary caregiver of people with Alzheimer's disease has worse health outcomes than any other type of caregiver. So it's killing the person, it's killing the caregiver, and it's wrecking our economy. Those 3 things alone, if you have something that can actually help these people with this tragic disease, you've got something that should be looked at as like a national treasure. And I thought that was going to ultimately keep my research career going basically for the rest of my life. And we still have so many questions that are unanswered about how much more we could, extend this line of research. And ultimately it didn't happen, which is, again, after that 4-year period from 13 to 17, when I left academics full time and I got tired of banging my head against the wall, I ultimately decided to leave academics and go into business. But nonetheless, that finding was just such an incredible finding. And then what supported that, and I'll finish this anecdote because I'm sure you have other questions. What supported that at the cellular level was that we showed an improvement in the CD4 to CD8 ratio. That is our ratio of helper cells to cytotoxic cells. That's a very important measure of overall immune system functioning. That's important for all of us, not just for people with Alzheimer's. We showed a reduction in 2 very important inflammatory markers called TNF-alpha and VEGF. Our paper was probably the first paper that published that finding in people with Alzheimer's disease. They're normally looked at in people with cancer and heart disease. And then finally, we showed an increase of adult stem cells, according to CD4 cells, just under 300% over that 12 months. So I mentioned that these folks, on average, were 79.9 years of age. We turned on that adult stem cell production process like you can't believe. Again, just under 300% increase. And we know through other research, that CD14s can turn into neurons. So when you look at that picture all together, you have this improved clinical cognitive effect, improving the overall immune system's functioning, lowering inflammation, and increasing the adult stem cell production. You put all of that together, and it's a really beautiful picture. It's the only paper, Leslie, in my career, you mentioned I have over 180 publications in my career. It's the only paper in my career where I submitted the article for publication, and the editor of the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease, Dr. Perry, he actually called me. He said, "Oh my God, this paper is incredible. Like, as soon as I get the reviews back from the reviewers, I'm going to recommend we publish this article immediately." That never happened before. And that was in about a 30-day period, which again, I've had papers take years to get published. But in this case, even the editor of the journal was blown away at our findings. And so I'm still riding that wave, even though I couldn't get more funding. I couldn't find, either institutional support or, some really wealthy person with more money than he has common sense to say, wow, let me help Lewis here extend this line of research. So I chose to go into business to ultimately make enough money myself to continue funding the research. It's going to take me a while. It's taking me longer than I wish it had, but that's ultimately my goal, is because, again, when you look at how tragic this disease is, and from a conventional medical perspective, there's nothing that's helping these people. And despite Alzheimer's Association raising hundreds of millions of dollars, they don't have anything to show for these people. They've literally wasted hundreds of millions of dollars. I will say that emphatically, because their organization, in my opinion, is a joke. They're not doing anything for people. They're funding all of this basic research that doesn't do anything. Yeah. And they're looking for drug solutions. And there's never going to be any drug that's going to solve this. It's going to be through natural methods. But I don't want to sound bitter about all that. That's in the past. I've moved on from it. But that, without question, these polysaccharides, that's why I'm so passionate, Leslie, about spreading the message of these polysaccharides and what they can actually do for people. Because again, I just don't think there's anything else out there like them in terms of what Mother Nature provides for us. In fact, if I may, just one more little point. For the carnivore crowd, for all those people caught up in protein and meat, you will never find one study on red meat doing anything like that. There is not one. There is no possibility of one study on red meat showing anything like that. Zero. If there is, please email it to me. I want to see it.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you for all your work and all the years of research, and because everybody, it hits home. We know loved ones that have gone through this, grandparents, so it really just keep on plodding and never give up, because we need people like you to, really open the eyes of the world to what's really going on and what can help us. And so to that, how do you eat, supplement, and exercise really to achieve that optimal health? And what really are the top 5 behaviors for people to achieve that optimal health? Somebody that's just starting to get into this whole realm of awareness of just staying away from the processed food, which can be very addictive, and just trying to eat what Mother Earth provides. What kind of words of wisdom can you share with everybody? And also, if you could also give us your contact information, how people can reach out to you.
Well, let's start with what I would think for most people would be the simplest thing that they can do, and that would be, let's look at physical activity. How about walking? I mean, if you've got a decent pair of shoes and you live in a safe neighborhood, there is no reason why you can't spend, and again, if you've not been physically active for decades, I get it. So it's going to take some effort just to get off your couch and really start that behavior process where you make it an actual habit, as opposed to just saying, oh, this is something I don't want to do. It's like a necessary evil. But just start going for a walk, even if it's just for 10 minutes a day, and then start slowly but surely adding minutes to those 10 minutes. You'll eventually get yourself up to an hour per day of just walking. I mean, there's really no excuse for anybody, unless you're in a wheelchair. If you're bound to a wheelchair, that's a different story. But if you can just walk every day for even just a few minutes, that one thing will help transform your life tremendously. It's going to take time, of course. The body responds to things relatively slowly when we're talking about natural methods. This isn't like having a headache. You take your Tylenol and then 10 or 15 minutes, your headache's gone. This is allowing our physiology to work to our benefit. And so that takes some time. And that's why for a lot of people, compliance ends up becoming an issue because they don't stick to it. So that's one thing. Start walking every day. And then eventually, as you build up some physical stamina, as you build up some capacity, then I would suggest start incorporating in some weight training, because again, weight training is going to be so incredibly valuable. And it's really what I've hung my hat on, so to speak, for most of my adult life. So that's number one. Number two, make sure you're hydrating. I mean, a lot of people are walking around dehydrated. They're not even drinking water every day. They're drinking coffee or soda or tea or milk or, these garbage energy drinks, all these things that are filled with all these chemicals. Just start drinking good, clean, filtered water every day. That is so important. I mean, there are so many links to dehydration and all of these risks of chronic disease that we've been mentioning. So start drinking, several glasses of good, clean, filtered water every day. That's a very important point. Number three, even if you're not interested in, going all the way to like, plant-based like me, at least start eating some greens every day. And I know that, again, there's a group of people out there that will say that kale and spinach, they've got these phytates and these anti-nutrients in it. That is nonsense. I mean, the body has this capacity. That's the reason why we have hydrochloric acid in our stomach, to break down things to the body. Its intelligence knows this is waste. These are usable nutrients, and these are the ones that I'm going to use. And the rest gets passed out. This whole anti-nutrient business drives me crazy. I don't know about you, but greens are arguably some of the most beneficial foods that Mother Nature provides for us. So start eating some greens every day. I mean, again, that's not, in my opinion, of looking at your overall, what you're doing with your time and your life and your priorities. Choosing to put some greens into your system every day should not be that difficult for most people. So that's number three. Number four, get plenty of sleep. How many people do you know that have insomnia? Even if they don't have outright insomnia, they still have difficulty sleeping. Man, you have to get your 6 to 7 to 8 hours of sleep every night, because it's so important, not only for you to rest, but your body actually cleans itself at night. The brain actually cleans out that waste that it creates during the day. That is what is going on at night. Your brain is getting cleaned out. You have these microglia that help to clean out that metabolic waste that ultimately can down the road turn into a greater risk of having dementia if you're not sleeping well. So that is a very, very important thing that we all need to do. And then finally, number five, I mean, look at your entire diet, look at what you're eating every day. If you are caught up, which I'm going to assume most people are just because of where we are today, if you are caught up in this standard American diet craze, try to slowly but surely start weaning yourself off of that. Look at adding in some of these supplements that I mentioned earlier, like vitamin D plus magnesium. That's also another one that's very important. Your Bs, if you need methylation, if you need methylated types of your vitamin Bs, vitamin C, iron. I mean, some of these things are very important for all of us, your omega-3s, your omega-6s. And then, of course, I'd be silly not to go ahead and say that, and consider these polysaccharides that I've mentioned. Because again, there's nothing else that I would say that, from a very simple behavior of just taking a dietary supplement every day, as opposed to modifying your diet or going from sedentary to physically active, most people will be able to handle just taking a supplement every day, as opposed to making some of these greater wholesale changes. But I mean, and there are lots of other things that we could get into, but, just in terms of like a top five, I mean, those would be for me at the top of my list. I'm grateful for the time that we've had today. If people want to learn about me more, you can go to drlewisnutrition.com. That's Dr. No period Lewis, Lewis, nutrition.com. We're under all the typical social media channels by that handle as well, Dr. Lewis Nutrition. Our website is loaded with all of this information about our research that led to the creation of Daily Brain Care. We're so proud of that product, my colleagues and I. I mean, this is literally decades of my life. And I don't want anybody to think that this is just some, get rich quick scheme. This is literally my life's work. And so I'm very proud of all of the effort that's gone into that. Even though I'm not in academics full time anymore, I'm still publishing scientifically. In fact, I even have 2 books that I've recently written, one on nutrition and cognitive function, one on nutrition and immune function. You can find both of those under my name at both Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and I think Books A Million as well. But I'm happy to answer anybody's questions. If you can go to our website, you can email us, you can give us a call, look at the information, see what questions you might have that are not already addressed under our FAQ section. But again, I'm very grateful for this opportunity to share with you guys today, and I look forward to our next opportunity to come back.
Absolutely. I would love to have you back. You're just a wealth of information and all that you've done and your passion and your drive to really make shifts and changes in our world for people to live a healthier lifestyle. And so with that, thank you very much for being on my show.
Thank you.
And for all our viewers and listeners, please reach out to Dr. Lewis if you have any questions. Just fascinating topic, and it's something that we really have to take seriously. And remember, get out there, ground with Mother Earth. And if everybody loves the topic and keep it dirty and everything that I bring to the table, please subscribe and rate and review. Keep it dirty. Take care, and thanks a lot. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.